Hi, I'm Ben. Welcome to my book corner. I am joined today by the amazing Dave Lawson. If you want to introduce yourself, tell people who you are.
Hello, I am Dave Lawson. I am a fantasy author from the great state of Oklahoma in the United States of America. And I have written 2 books at this point. We've got The Envoys of War. This one here has the fancy sprayed edges that I did myself in the backyard. This is a snarky, witty fantasy with a lot of D&D vibes. And this one came out last October. Had a lot of fun writing it. It is now also an audiobook, and just a lot of fun to write, and hopefully for people, a lot of fun to read. And then new novella that came out about half a month ago now, The Pawns of Havoc, which is a prequel following Cork, one of the side characters in the Envoys of War. This is a little bit of a darker story overall. Still has the snark and the banter, but probably goes to some darker places than Envoys did. As you can see, it's a novella. It's not as big, but I do think the hardcover looks really cool. So, yeah, those are my 2 books.
It does. So we'll start with the D&D vibes because I love D&D. So
Me too.
was that something you were specifically going for from the outset, or was it just something that naturally developed as you were writing your characters?
So what I would say is that I have read fantasy. I think I grew up reading more sci-fi than fantasy, but I've read a lot of fantasy in the last 5 to 10 years. But one of the things that really got me back into even thinking about writing again is because I have a master's degree in fiction writing. I used to write literary fiction. I published some short stories in lit journals and published literary fiction novella and different things a while ago. Like this was 2007 to 2011 ish, and then I kind of stopped writing because I don't know, I lost the interest in it. I wasn't really having fun anymore, and then I started playing D&D in maybe 2020 or 2021, and it sparked my creativity again. And so Envoys actually started out as a short story that was basically just me writing a little short story about one of the characters in the D&D campaign. Her name is Yuka. She is a barbarian. And I wrote 5 pages of this little short story, and it was fun, but I kind of was like, I don't know if I really want to write more of this. And so what I did was I took a little tiny bit from that and completely redid everything, created a new world, new characters, and wrote the first draft of what came to be Envoys. And I don't think I went into it thinking I want this to be a D&D story, but I do think that I'd been playing a lot of D&D, and so some of the aspects of what I enjoy in a fantasy novel, a lot of times it's going to be I am all about characters trying to talk their way out of situations. When I play D&D, that's what I constantly try to do. I'm usually a bard or something like that. If I'm not a bard, I act like a bard, but I'm a bard another class, but I act like a bard. My character I play right now he was a centaur ranger. Now he's a kobold ranger because he was turned into a kobold by a spell. But he constantly tries to use charisma, and he has a +0 charisma. But
Oh, wow.
that's just me. That's what I do. So basically, I did not write it intending it to be a D&D story, but it has those vibes because I love D&D and I play D&D.
Yeah.
But the one part that made it from the original little short story to the novel is the female main character with a weapon fighting a giant spider. So
Fair enough. I have memories of fighting spiders in D&D.
that was the little thing
Oh,
that story started with, and it was just a half a page, And that was the original start of Envoys. It started with her fighting the spider, and then Corden showed up, and then they were on. And then, like, the problem was that chapter 2 was then a big flashback going back to,
Yeah.
like, say all, like, give them their mission and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't quite work because it was like, in the action, in the present, let's go back a day. And then I also originally very, very D&D in that they were on a real mission, they were off on their adventure, and then they just like get completely sidetracked and go do this other thing. And
Yeah.
basically, some of my, I think probably this was beta readers at this point, or like early beta readers, basically said something along the lines of, it's kind of like you're not setting the reader up for what the story really is, because they think it's going to be this like story about these two envoys on a mission to deliver this message, and then you get some chapters in and they're just like, who cares about the mission?
Yeah.
So I had to go back and like make some changes there to make it make sense, so it wasn't just like, they're just abandoning this important mission for no, because they feel like it. Because like in D&D,
Yeah.
you're going
That's what
along,
happens all the
you're
time.
on this mission, something happens, and you're like, let's go do that. That's more interesting than this mission we're on.
Oh, honestly, the first time I ever played, I played a ranger, and I'd never played before. Everything was rolled for me, stats, background, and everything. So I ended up as a ranger with a performer background with a -2 in charisma because he rolled a 7 for me. It's like, this is not going to go well. And then eventually stuff went, after we died to a pig, after we got through all that, we got to think where we were camping in a forest and spiders, and we just hit level 3. And had gone Gloomstalker, and the DM didn't realise how good Gloomstalker was in the dark. And that was fun. And then we never played in that campaign ever again after that
I think
session for some reason.
my
Can't
character
imagine
is a
why.
Gloomstalker.
Yeah,
Um,
favorite. I don't know what it is. I used to be a wizard main, but nowadays, and I don't know why, ranger all the way.
I'm
But it's
kind of
interesting you
bored with
mentioned that.
Ranger at this point, but also he's like a level
Yeah,
14 now, and we've
yeah,
done a lot with it, and I'm kind of at the point where I want to do something with besides just shooting arrows.
yeah.
But
No, the only other game was we started a Strixhaven game, and I was a sorcerer, and I broke the school at level 2. Don't tell me I can't break things. But it's interesting you mentioned the sort of going off the beaten track, because when that started to happen, it's like at this point, because it's obviously read in the in sort of the notes about the blurb, so to speak, about the sort of D&D vibes. It's like, oh, hang on, we have the main quest, over there, and it's like, oh, I recognize this straight away. But the fact that they again got pulled along this through like a number of different emotional means worked really, really well for me. So, how much when you're going through your writing process, how much of it do you outline before? How much of it is just like a seat of your pants sort of organic sort of approach to writing?
so what I would say is that I usually do some outlining, but then when I write, I go completely off in new tangents from some aspects of the outlining, which I think is what happens in general.
Yeah,
So like my original outline for Envoys had the entire second half of the book was happening very differently, just because I don't think I really knew at that point exactly where I wanted to go with things. But then I was writing and I added in some moments along the way that really brought the story into different places than I had originally outlined it, and it made it a better story. Um,
yeah,
so like I usually I have an outline, but it's not something I would never say I'm married to the outline. Like I am willing to throw it off and go in a completely new direction if something else just to me feels like this is going to work better. With Pawns, I had an outline and I knew what was going to happen from the beginning, and then I started writing it. And about midway through, I went off on a total tangent that completely didn't really connect back to things. And some of my alpha readers were reading and they were like, I feel like you're losing the plot here. And I was like, yeah, I know. And so I just cut the entire second half and rewrote it to actually fit in with like, because I did the same thing again where it's like, here's the mission. Ooh, this mission's more fun. And I had to go,
Shiny.
no, I can't do that again. This story is only 100 pages. I can't, add in a 100-page subplot in this little novella because then it's not a novella anymore. So I cut all of that and rewrote to actually stay within the more streamlined story. But like I think in general, I am always going to probably have a little bit of that D&D vibe because I've talked about this many times in interviews and on socials and everything, but like the banter and the back and forth and the bickering and everything, like that's my favorite. I love writing dialogue, and I love writing bickering, bantering dialogue. It's what I've always loved writing. I wrote plays in high school and I wrote screenplays in college. And I mean, I think I wanted to be a playwright for a long time. And then when I went to college, I took a lot of fiction writing classes and kind of started writing short stories. But one of the reasons I really loved writing plays was because it's all dialogue. And I love dialogue. So a lot of times when I write the dialogue first. The scenes come out in dialogue, and I'm just like, I'm cooking on the dialogue. And then I go back in and add things around it, like descriptions, which is the hardest thing for me to write. Other aspects, because the dialogue is what comes to me first. Because
and it's interesting you mentioned that actually, because there was another author I was speaking to recently who doesn't really do much descriptive world building. It's all dialogue based. And I think it's a sign of really good dialogue that I'd never picked up on that, which is really bizarre to say. But historically, I've came from reading Wheel of Time, which is a little bit detailed. Just a little bit.
Just a little.
And yeah, and for me to not notice was real sort of strength of the dialogue in his books. And I had a similar sort of experience when I listened to Envoys of War, because it was the audiobook version, which you very kindly sent me, that I listened to. And again, very similar sort of thing where the dialogue carries the world building so well and gives you as much information as you need, which I'm beginning, I might be a sign that I'm getting older, but I am enjoying that more now than what I used to, which I really, really liked. And you mentioned the banter. How much of it is a deliberate choice to have two such opposite characters as Jen and Corden traveling together? Because they feel like polar opposites, where one's going to strangle the other eventually. At times, it really does.
In general, I think it's fun. I've always loved the buddy movies and stuff where you have like straight-laced character with crazy one, or like the cop who's too old for this shit and the other one who is like an idiot. Like I like it when you have opposites together because they pull on each other in fun ways. I also just think in general, a lot of times when people are really good friends, they're often not just friends with people who are exactly the same as them.
No.
They're friends with people who are very different. And so it's fun to have, like, basically Corden is the friend who is always getting them into trouble, and Jen is the friend who's always trying to get them out of that trouble. And she gets annoyed with him, but at the same time, she cares a lot about him and isn't going to just be like, I hate you, leave me alone, because you're annoying me. She's kind of like, oh, you're annoying me, but you're my friend, and I'm going to keep following along, and maybe one of these times we'll figure things out.
You can just hear the not again, like so constantly running through. It's like, what have you done that? Oh no.
Lawrence Sterling Knott, the audiobook narrator, did such a good job with whenever Jen was just exasperated with Corden. I loved that aspect. He did a really great job with the dialogue, and I think one of the things he said whenever whenever I booked him, and he said, like, I love this book because there's so much good, fun dialogue to work with. And so I think it's the kind of book that works really well with audio, because a lot of times audio, you need characters and dialogue. And if it's a lot of world building, it's hard to get into. And I think you mentioned Wheel of Time. The books that have so much world building at the beginning, I tune out and I zone out, and I don't make it through a lot of those, to where, like, for me, world building through dialogue is the only way that I can really get through it in a book. Unless it's like something like The Lies of Locke Lamora. I thought he did a really good job with the world building there, where it was like, here are scenes with characters full of dialogue and like really good. And then you'd have like a short little interlude part where he would describe something in the city and then back to characters, and like something like that I can handle. But like I've read the first book of Wheel of Time and I liked it, but I knew I wasn't going to get through all 14. And so I just kind of like, there's no point in me continuing, because I'm not going to finish the series. It's too many books. And
it's a hell of an investment. I'm doing a reread at the moment. There's a group of us, and the aim is to be up to about book 5 by now. Not started book 3 yet. I keep looking at it going, you know what? I'll just read all these other things. I'll come back, and everybody's behind. Some of them are not rereaders. It's first time reading. It's like, I love it, but there's so much. It's like, yeah, they're dense. Love them, but
I will never read Malazan. I will never try to read Malazan. Just everything I've heard about it is basically like, this book is work and you're not going to know what's happened. Like, that sounds like hell to me. I want to have fun when I'm reading. And it doesn't mean that the characters have to be having fun, because, like, I mean, my characters are not having fun most of the time.
No, they're definitely not in Pawns of Havoc.
No, so it's like, I kind of describe, like, yes, there's a lot of humor in my stories, but I wouldn't classify them as just comedies, because the characters are not having fun. There's a lot of serious stuff in them. There's comedic moments, but I wouldn't just say, like, it's a funny little comedy story, because there's not funny, not comedy things in there as well, to where, like, a comedy drama, I think, fits in. I've always liked that kind of, when it's funny, but it has the serious backbone to it. If it's just funny all the time, I struggle. And like, Terry Pratchett is great, but I sometimes struggle with his books because they're so, like, and it's not like he has a serious backbone to them a lot of times, but they're sometimes too silly.
Yeah.
And
I get that. I've read all of the Discworld books,
and I think he's a great writer, and I like his writing. But there's sometimes too
silly.
And like,
there's a balance thing there, which is something that works really well with Envoys, is that you have these really, really dark moments. For example, around I'm reading the wrong character names. Around Avelia's brother going missing, but then you've still got all the banter that's going on, but you still have this sort of, it stops the story going too dark and becoming too overpoweringly grim, and it balances it really well at times, just to give you that moment, because that's how people cope in real life. I know it's something that ZB mentioned as well when I was speaking to him about, this is how people cope with that banter. Speaking about the audio book itself then, because this is something I'm always curious about, how do you go about picking an audio book narrator? How does the process look in terms of the feedback and, like, because obviously you're kind of giving your baby to someone else to do a performance.
Right.
How does that look in terms of getting it how you want and taking the feedback? And because I know there was some feedback about some of the voice choices in there as well, which I think Lawrence mentioned to me in on over on X at some point, or maybe it was one of you mentioned it to me. How does that look like?
I think I mentioned that to you. So what happened was, I did it through ACX, which is the Audiobook Creation Exchange, connected to Audible. And I put up a listing with a little section of like a 5 to 7 minute section, and people could audition. I did the royalty share option, which meant I don't pay anything up front, but Lawrence and I share the royalties 50-50. A lot of some audiobook narrators and a lot of like the big name people will they require just like money up front. And I'm I'm a teacher. I teach high school. I don't have the money
Yeah.
to fund
No.
audiobooks, really. So
One of the underpaid professions, I would argue, to be
yeah.
honest. So
So I listened to a bunch of different version, like different people, like they'd have like little snippets of their different work. And I wanted a British narrator because I thought it fit with the story. My characters are very Britishy. And then I listened to a bunch of these things and I messaged narrators that I thought would work well. Because I only got one audition from someone that I didn't message. And if you do the ones where you pay, I've heard you can get like 200 auditions because
yeah,
there's money up front. But there's less of that whenever, you're not paying up front. And Lawrence had a really good audition. I think I had 3 auditions that were really good. And so I was kind of going back and forth among those. And when it came down to it in the end, Lawrence had the best Corden. And for me, that was what I was like, he has the best Corden. I've got to go with that. So
yeah. I wanted to punch Corden so many times because of the voice performance, which is a testament to what Lawrence did with the
I
character. To be
love
honest,
Corden so much, but yes, he does need to be punched a lot. But
yeah,
like whenever Lawrence got to the moments where Corden kind of dropped the facade and got emotional, there was so much like rawness in the voice at those moments, and
yeah,
I got chills at moments whenever Corden kind of dropped the facade.
yeah.
And so like,
I really liked as well. Sorry,
go
go on.
ahead.
So I really liked as well the fact, because it's something that I've noticed in a lot of audio, especially where you have the audiobooks where every character gets a voice, like Lawrence did with yours, where quite often when they go into their own headspace, it's done in narrator's voice, not the character voice. And Lawrence kept with the character voice in there, which really helped drive home the monologues as well, which I really liked.
And that's
Especially again
one
with Corbin.
I also really like that. And I think it's hard to tell sometimes when something's in the like character's thoughts if the audio narrator isn't actually saying it in their voice. And like you look at like Stephen Pacey with the First Law books, Glockta is constantly thinking things in his head. And it's just like the audios of the First Law series is great. And partially it's because like all of those thoughts are in the character's voice.
Yeah.
And so Lawrence was doing that kind of on his own. I think he might have asked if that's what I wanted. And I was like, yes, definitely. But so after I hired him, he like sent the first little checkpoint. I listened to that, said, yep, let's keep going. And then over time, he recorded the whole book and edited the whole book. And then I got a copy of the book and I listened while reading the entire book and made notes as to like, there's a word missing here, or this word was kind of hard to hear, or oh wow, I have this written in the past tense, but it's a thought, and that should be in the present tense. Sorry,
Yeah.
we need to fix that. Having an audiobook made is the greatest proofreading thing you can ever do. Because while doing that, I caught a lot of little like this sentence is kind of awkward. Fix.
Yeah.
And so I was able to fix them then in the other versions of the book as well. And there were not any huge problems, but like there were a few parts that were thoughts that were in past tense, whereas the thoughts should be in present tense because they're the character's thought and not. So like I had to make some changes on some of those. And there were a few things that were in thoughts originally that when in the audio it didn't really make sense for the character to be thinking it. It was more of just like something that should be in the narrative. So some of those little things like we fixed. There were a few things he said in a very like his accent came through on a few things, and to me it sounded like a different word. And so like he tried to really enunciate that one to where it didn't like change into a different word. But like there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of communication. He's fantastic. And then we finally got the book done, and you send it out and wait for Audible to like approve it all. And so we're going to start doing Pawns here next month.
Oh, awesome.
And so, I mean, that one's going to be a lot shorter, so it'll be an easier process overall. But yeah, that audio will start being recorded hopefully next month. And then, you know, it takes a while because like it's not like he is not a full-time audiobook narrator or anything like that, to where he's doing it kind of in his free time. So he does a lot of voice work and things like that. But he's great to work with, and yeah, we'll get the little mini audio for Pawns out here hopefully by
Looking
the end
forward
of the
to
year.
that. Yeah, that'll be fun. Can we talk a little bit about magic?
Of course.
Because I love a good magic system in my fantasy books. And you've gone with a very specific approach to magic in that you focused on magic, at least appears to just be focused just on water itself, or that's how it's stated in the book. What made you first of all focus on one? Because quite often magic is split over, like your core elements, earth, air, fire, water. What's made you focus on water in particular? And how did you take this one element, which, generally speaking, when magic systems are split, they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but water feels like it can do not everything, but there's some really creative use in terms of some of the way the magic is used, which I don't want to spoil here.
Yeah.
What made you go down that route and where you ended up
So
at?
I think it started out because I've always loved port cities and ships. And I was born in New Hampshire, which is on the east coast of the United States, right off of the ocean. And one of my favorite places to go growing up was a place called Portsmouth, which was named obviously after the British
Yep.
Portsmouth. And I've always loved port cities and the ocean and ships, and so I wanted that to be a part of things. And I think it just kind of came down to I didn't want it to be a like there's fire mages, water mages, earth mages. I didn't want to do the like all the elements, kind of,
Yeah.
because I feel like that is done a lot. And I wanted to sort of try to change it up, but I also wanted there to be some restrictions on what could be done. So like they can do just about anything with water, but none of them can be like spraying fire at somebody, or like, you know, causing an earthquake of sand, or like I didn't want to really get over the top with like too much. The mages are overpowered in this society, and I think that's part of what I like about it, because mages can basically do just about anything to a normal person, and the normal person can't really stop it, which leads to some troubling situations if the mages decide that they want to be in charge. And so you've got some civilizations that are very mage centric because they're the ones with the power. And that's something I'm exploring now as I'm writing book 2. But the big thing was just kind of like I wanted to be simple, because magic systems for me, if they're too strict, I get a little bit kind of like, oh god, more magic system. For example, like Mistborn, I think it's a cool magic system, but after a while I was getting kind of like, oh, he's burning this metal again. Okay, cool. Or like I kind of like it when it's a little bit more sort of like it is magic and it's not just science. So here, most of my characters don't really know how the magic works. Even the mage Tobias, I would argue, he doesn't really know like where it comes from, or just like he knows the things you say and how to do the things. Because I kind of like the idea of a magic system that is that it's magic and there's not like a specific science behind every aspect of it. But also I kind of, as I was writing, added new like this would be cool, add that in. this would be cool. Add that in, and then figure out like how do I make this connect. There was one part where I had a mage suddenly be able to control people's minds.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking of.
Well, so I had a mage suddenly be able to control people's minds, like, and make them do things. And it was like at one point, Corden, toward the end of the book, a bad guy makes Corden like stab Tobias in the original version because he like takes over Corden's mind and makes him do the thing. And it's just like when it came down to it, it really didn't make sense within the magic system of water. It's like water doesn't make you suddenly be able to like convince people to stab other people. So that one part that is still in the book earlier on, I changed it up to where it fit within like, instead of like, it's not forcing someone to do a specific thing, just like swirl things up a little bit. And so for me, there were like a good beta reader or developmental editor or alpha reader is worth their weight in gold, because they can kind of mention some of those things. They're like, hey, this doesn't quite fit with the rest, and then you rewrite or edit to make it make sense.
Yeah, and what really worked as well was when that scene specifically happened, the characters around it's like, we didn't know magic could do that. So there's obviously a level of like secrecy as well that goes into this, which potentially helps further down the line, because you've not got that, well, everybody knows the rules of magic. And it's like, well, actually you don't.
And like the whole thing with the enhancements, which I really like, and I'm exploring that even more as we go. It's like, it's somehow water magic, like they're able to infuse the water with the powers and cause enhancements. But how does it work? The people, my main characters, don't know, because they're not the ones doing that stuff. Like that's way beyond. Like Tobias is a mage, but he doesn't know how to enhance someone. Like it's sort of that secret or unspoken magic that some people know, but most other people don't. And I like that, because it kind of gives a vibe of like, it's not just this thing that everyone knows how magic works and what you can do, and these are the rules. And it's kind of more like, there's things that can happen, and Jen and Corden don't know what those things are, because they really don't have that much experience with mages beyond ice shards.
Yeah, and it's especially as you hit the back end of the book as well, when we start to bump into the wind properly, and you begin to see actually there's a difference between understanding of magic society from one society to the other as well. Really, really interesting. Now, speaking of the wind, Pawns of Havoc goes a bit closer into, touches on them a little bit more in some regards. Did you always intend to write a novella about involving a character from Envoys, or is it just you enjoyed writing Cork as a character so much that you thought, you know what, I want to write more of this?
So I think I definitely wanted to write a prequel novella of sorts. The original intention was to write something to just be like a newsletter thing, to like, you sign up for my newsletter and get this free. And then I wrote it, and I was kind of like, I want to do a little bit more with it than that. So I'm going to like actually release it, and not just have it as a newsletter freebie, because I kind of felt like it got a little bit longer, and I felt like I liked the story quite a bit, and I didn't want to just have it be that kind of thing. Like looking at what Zach did with Inkling of Flame, like he published the novella there first, but like he showed like, and Tim Wolfe has done it with Whisper That Replaced God, and sort of like, release a novella as a book, and not just as like a freebie sign up thing, because I think if it's just a freebie sign up thing, you're kind of limiting the reach of who's going to actually find the book.
Yeah.
because they have to sign up for your newsletter and then find it that way and read it. And it's kind of, I don't know, you're limiting who's going to actually find the book. And one of my main goals is just to like try to get my books out to people beyond just the people who are on, you know, the indie social media, just the people on Twitter and Blue Sky and Instagram, but like to just like normal readers who read books and are not, you know, following indie fantasy on Twitter. And so that's the goal, I think, of a lot of us, is to, you know, find readers beyond the little bubble. And
the great thing as well is sometimes 400 pages ish can be an investment in time. A novella is a great way to, especially if it's like a prequel, like Pawns of Havoc is, like Inkling of Flamers as well. It's a great way to introduce a little bit of the world and a little bit of the style of storytelling as well. That works really well. Then you can go, you know what, really like this. Let's go and check out more, because it's not that much. It's like, oh, it's 400 pages.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, like, there are going to be some readers who, like, I know some people who don't read novellas because they feel like, why read a novella whenever you can read the full novel that's going to be more, like, it's going to have more to it. I like to read novellas, even though it's one of the, I didn't used to read them very much, but since I kind of joined the indie space, novellas are a great way to kind of get an idea of what someone's writing and their books are like. And so I like them, and I think it's a good thing for an author to have, like, because what you're saying, because like someone might try your novella to see if they want to try the rest of your stuff. And so for me, it was something I wanted to do. I also was kind of burnt out after writing the full novel, and just kind of was like, I don't want to immediately jump into book 2. I need to take a little bit of a break. And so I took a break with, you know, Cork, but it was a different story. I've also written a short story that's going to be coming out in an anthology sometime later this year, that's set on the Isle of Wind, and the main character is a cook. She's not a mage, but she's just one of the like normal people that live on the Isle. And so that one will be coming out sometime later this year. So like I've spent a lot of time kind of focusing in on the Wind because they are so interesting and enigmatic, and like they're kind of one of those, like, are they the villains? Are they just doing their own thing and they do what they decide they need to do for what they want? Like, and one of the things I wanted to focus on with my books was that there's not always just one evil mustache twirling villain. There are a lot of people who might be villains or enemies at some point, but a lot of times it's just like they are fighting on a different side of an issue, but they're not evil. And so you have a lot of people who, in my books, that are kind of, I don't even know if morally gray is the correct term, because it's just like, I wouldn't call them bad people, but they are fighting on one side of an issue. And there are some bad people as well, obviously. But and then like in Pawns of Havoc, I really wanted to focus on, like, Cork is a big dude who's done some bad things in his life. Like, he's been a mercenary for, you know, in this story, he's been a mercenary for like 5 or 6 years. In Envoys, he's been a mercenary for 16 years or something, 18 years. Like, in that amount of time, you're going to have done some bad things as a mercenary.
Oh, yeah.
And so I kind of wanted to show, like, Cork, he has a moral compass, but also there's only so much you can do with a moral compass when you're doing that kind of job. And like, I really wanted to kind of answer the question of like, how far would you go to save the people you love? Because if you think about, like, if your family members are going to die if you don't do something, are you going to go kill some person you don't know to save your family? I think a lot of people would probably say yes. Because it's hard to be like, no, I won't kill that random person I've never met to save my parents and siblings, because I have to kill some random person I never met. Like, I think most people would be like, yes, I would do that to save the people I care the most about. And
And it
so,
worked really well in Pawns because you've then got Nessa and Arabella on either side, who are almost like the opposite sides of the spectrum. So you got a whole sliding scale there, especially with Nessa, who is a really kind person.
Nessa was a lot of
Possibly.
fun to write. Just like the most vicious person you can ever think of. Arabella might be my favorite character.
Yeah.
They're just like, I love her sort of naivety. It's just, she's naive. She is kind of like tries to think of things in a little bit more of like a positive life. Like, we can do this, we can save people. And everyone else is just like, no.
Meanwhile, daggers.
Yeah, it's just like, and Nessa's
Yeah.
like, no, we're gonna kill him. Cork is like, look, we have a job, we do the job. It's what you do. Like, you don't just like say, no, I don't want to do that. Those people are nice. Like, you do
You know
what
what will
you're,
happen if we don't do that?
yeah.
They'll be us.
And so I thought that was a fun sort of dynamic between murderous assassin, naive, young sort of archer who's doesn't really have any experience, but is like, I want to do something. I want to get out and see the world. And then Cork, who's kind of an in between. He's jaded, but not to the point of Nessa, and he's not nearly as like naive as an Arabella. And kind of like the focus of these different three characters kind of pulling at each other a lot as they go. And once again, like halfway through the book, I had so like when there was a subplot about like saving a town, and it became like they've spent way too much time like going around and like trying to like and fighting the bad guys in the town and like trying to save this town, and like when it came down to it, it was losing the original point. So I cut all of that. And as it is now, like there is kind of a mention of it a little bit, but it changes from like something that Cork is like, okay, let's go do this thing. They're like, no, we don't have time. Um, and so little things like that, just like I think I really like the story. I really like the three main characters. It's definitely darker than Envoys, especially in the third act. I've been accused of trying to make people cry, but
Yeah, it's definitely a dark final act, to be fair. But so, in terms of your writing, that's not English, writing process, what does a normal day look like for you in terms of writing? How do you approach, or is there no such thing?
um, well, whenever I'd say like I try to set up like a schedule of when to write. I haven't been very good at it recently. But like when I wrote Envoys, I had a spreadsheet and like how many words I wanted to try to get done that day, and like I was locked in, and I kind of burnt myself out.
Yeah.
And so I took some time off. I wrote most of Pawns and then let it sit for a while, and then came back, cut out the whole second act, and rewrote it. And then since then, I've written some this summer. I'm working on two different projects. But I need to probably do a little bit better about scheduling. But I don't want to burn myself out again, so I'm not going to schedule as much per day. But like with Envoys, I was working full time because it was during the school year. I was directing
Yeah.
a school musical, so I was gone for 14 hours a day, and then I'd get home and I'd write 1,000 words, and then I'd write 2,000 words a day on the weekends, and like I burnt myself out, and so I'm trying to take it more slowly with with projects now, because I don't want it to become like a chore where I'm sitting down and not enjoying myself, because part of why I write is because I like telling stories and it's fun, and I don't
Yeah.
want it to become like a chore that I don't like doing.
Yeah, which is fair. That'd probably come through, to be fair, as well, if it started to become a chore. you probably actually start to spot it in the writing as well.
Well, I think you get a lot
So
of like some of those people who are like full-time writers, who just like are churning out book after book. Especially, I think you see it a lot in like the romance genre, where they'll be like
yeah,
publishing like 8 books a year because like it's their full-time job and they are just like writing 5,000 words a day. And I feel like at some point, the books are probably starting to lose some of their like the sense of wonder and the enjoyment because you're just like churning content out.
yeah,
And at some point, you have to kind of like, I feel like things don't maybe feel as fresh because you probably aren't really enjoying it if you're just churning out that many
yeah. All
words
things in
every
balance. All things in balance.
day. Mm-hmm.
Couple of general questions then. Do you have a favorite scene or chapter that you've written so far, and which one is it, if you do?
All right, I'm going to answer 2 different ones because I think I have 2 different, one from Envoys, one from Pawns. I'd say in Envoys, it is a tie between chapter 13, whenever Corden, um, his plan for how to like disguise himself takes on new darker
Yeah,
context that Jen is then forced to do. I love that part. I really, really like that part of the book. Like, I feel like it hits home pretty well. And then also, I'd say the scenes between Topper and Tobias, whenever Topper is kind of burying his emotions to his godfather. Those are some
yeah,
scenes that I really like. I would say those are my favorites from Envoys. In Pawns, I'm gonna say it's the scene when Arabella and Quark sit down and he kind of tells her the backstory as to why they're on the job, like why they can't just throw away the job and everything, and kind of that emotional moment between the two of them. So I don't know, like I love all the snark and the banter, but I think sometimes like when I think back at like that scene really hit hard, I often go back to scenes that maybe are a little bit more serious because I always want to have some of those mixed in so it's not just silly, um, goofy times all the time in there.
yeah, yeah. The one you mentioned in Envoys works so well because of it. Kind of highlights, even though Corden and Jen don't get on, it actually really does highlight how close they really are because of
Mm-hmm.
what she's having to do at the time, and the anguish that she's personally going through with that. It's really powerful scene, really well done. And also, again, Lawrence did an amazing job selling that as well with the
Yes.
performance for the audio as well, which really does help make that come across.
Funny thing about that scene. In my D&D game, one of the people who I played D&D with was one of my beta readers, and she actually had her character, a few weeks after she read that scene. Basically, we were doing trying to figure out how to infiltrate this camp. And so she decided she had her character do all of the things that Corden wanted to have done there. And so
oh
like then
wow,
my character basically played the Jen. And like we did all the things. And the other people in the campaign did not know what it was at first. They didn't really realize they hadn't read the book. And then it worked. And so I was like, okay, there is evidence right here that this plan is fantastic because it
yeah.
worked in that D&D campaign. But that was a
Oh
lot of fun.
no, love it. Um, in terms of what you read, then you've already mentioned in the last few years you've read more fantasy, sci-fi early on. What made you go to write fantasy ahead of sci-fi?
So I'm actually I'm working on a sci-fi secret project right now, because I love sci-fi, but science is hard.
Yeah,
And I think for me, and I've mentioned this before, and people have been like, you don't really have to have the science anymore as long as you're not writing the hard sci-fi. but I feel like it helps to at least have some of that stuff. With my current project, my uncle is a physics professor, so I've already reached out to him to be like, hey, I need some like sci-fi jargon to use in some of this. So we'll have that happen. But I think also just playing D&D kind of got me back into things to where fantasy is also what I've read a lot more of more recently. I would say the books that kind of got me really back into reading fantasy a lot. So the Jerrig series by Stephen Bruce, which is, I mean, he's been writing them since the 80s, like the Vlad Taltos series, I guess.
Yeah.
There's like 20 books in this series, and they're all pretty short and a lot of fun. And like I read a bunch of those, and then the Kings of the Wild and Bloody Rose by Nicholas Eames. I really enjoyed those. I love the Lies of Locke Lamora series, the Gentleman Bastards. Michael J. Sullivan has the Riri Revelation series, just kind of like that's my kind of fantasy where you've got characters that come together, they bicker, they banter. There's friendships and like the found family aspects, and they go on adventures. And so I think for me, that's the kind of fantasy that I like to read the most. And so whenever I wrote it, I wanted mine to, have some of those elements as well, because it's it's what I enjoy reading. It's a lot of fun. I'm never going to be a grimdark reader.
Yeah.
I need more hope and like happiness. And like I've read Inkling of Flame, and God, ZB's a fantastic writer. It's so depressing. Great book, but like, and I think for me, grimdark is hard because it's very
Yeah.
depressing. And I love depressing music, but like with fiction and with movies, I like there to be more like I like it bittersweet, more than just like everyone dies the end. And that's that's
I
my
get
personal thing. Like, grimdark is really huge in the like, especially the indie sphere. I think like grimdark is like if you say this is grimdark, there are people like, oh, that's my favorite, and for me, it's not. I want more hope and like at least moments of happiness, and I like things don't have to end happily, but I like it better if it's not just like
not everybody's died.
and, even so. There's grimdark. Like I would argue, like I like Joe Abercrombie, and I think I like The Devils more than The First Law, because it was a little bit funnier, and I feel like it wasn't quite as grim. I like the First Law series quite a bit, and I'd say like you start to sort of like some of those characters, but it's definitely very grim. I don't think it's as grimdark as some of the like. There are some indie grimdark books that are just like, how grim can we make it? And
Yeah.
for people who enjoy that, I think they're great books. I've heard a lot of good things about them. For me, it's just not really my thing because I like a little bit of happiness.
Yeah.
Like
The world is
I like a
really
little
yeah.
romantic subplot in there. Like, give me all those things.
Yeah. No, I had to ask ZB what grimdark actually was, because I just read books. It's like, I've read all this stuff. What is this exactly? It's like, well, it's like, oh, it's going to be not straightforward, is it? Okay, fine. But
I mean, and I think it is kind of a spectrum of grimdark, because like there are books that people call grimdark that I think are fun and hopeful. And I don't really know if it's there what they really mean is dark fantasy, or if like I think people have different definitions, but like the one that I've gotten recently from a lot of people is more like grim dark, everyone is not a good person and the world is horrible. Um and I would say like there are definitely some series where the world is horrible, but the characters are decent people, or they have like really likable parts to them. And so like I don't know, do those qualify as grimdark now? I don't know, but like the ones where it's just like everyone sucks and the world is horrible, I struggle just because that's not my, like, it's not the thing that I want to read. They can be great books, but they're just not my thing.
Yeah. Very similar to how I feel about cyberpunk a lot of the time. That genre, very, very similar.
I don't know that I have read a cyberpunk novel in quite a while. I think I've read a few, and I was just kind of meh. Not really. This is not really my thing. I liked the TV show Altered Carbon. I tried to read the book, and I was just like, I don't know. This is not my thing. And I've read a few others, but it's just, there's something about it. I like sci-fi, but cyberpunk just doesn't quite hit for me.
It's one that makes me put my walls up a bit like extreme horror does, where it's like it forces a bit of distance away.
I don't read horror. I don't watch horror. Don't read it. Like, nope.
I didn't used to. I have people to blame for that.
I'm just a wimp.
That's fair. There's nothing wrong with that.
Probably why I don't like the really grim stuff too, because I'm kind of a wimp. And I want things to be happy at some points.
I mean, reading's an escape.
Yeah.
So from the world,
for me,
so
it's an escape.
Yeah. I ask everyone this. Couple of questions that I've had on previous interviews from friends of mine. What's the best and the worst advice you've had as a writer?
I think the best advice probably has just been like, to whenever you start to like doubt yourself and start to have imposter syndrome about things, to just like keep writing and keep working on things and trying to improve with each book as you go, and not just being like, oh my God, I'm the worst writer ever because this person gave me 2 stars. I'm just gonna, never write again. I think not really trying to not let the outside forces. Reviews are great, ratings are great, and I look at them. I look at Goodreads and everything, even though I know some authors say like, don't look at that stuff. I do, but also I think it's one of those things. If some person leaves a bad, like, negative review and they say like, this book sucks, it's the worst book ever or whatever, you're just kind of like, I mean, not going to
Not every book's for everyone.
Move on. Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of those things where like, I haven't had too many reviews like that yet, but like, they're the kind of thing, they happen at some point to everyone, and you just kind of, okay, cool, there are a lot of people who like it, move on.
Yeah.
And I think you just kind of have to put up blinders a little bit about some of those things and just keep going, because if you're just like, people hated my book, like they loved book 2, but book 1, but book 2 hasn't gotten as many ratings, I should just quit writing because people hate book 2. Like, I think at some point you kind of have to just keep writing for you. And it's great to find readers and people who love your book, but especially when you're writing like indie, it's got to be for you first. Because if you're trying to write for your fans and everyone, and you're like someone who in the indie sphere who is not selling thousands of books a month, you don't have that many fans that are going to just be like constantly reading your books. It's got to be something that you enjoy. It has to kind of be a hobby of sorts, unless you are, one of the people who like goes professional and like really starts putting out a lot of books and trying to like make a go of it. And like, I don't have the time or the money to do that. So like, for me, it's a hobby and it's a lot of fun. And I think for me, I've got to have fun. I've got to like do it for me. Because if I start doing it for other people, then I think you start caring way too much about what other people think. And that's something I definitely do care too much about what people think in my life overall. Like, it's something I've always struggled with. So it's hard as a writer whenever you're like worried about what other people are going to think. But in a way, I think it's good, because I've been able to kind of be like, okay, I have to sort of stop worrying what other people think and just be happy with so character growth. So that was the first question. What was the other one?
You've actually covered the other one because it was to do with writer's block, and you've kind of touched it on that one.
Oh, the
Which,
worst advice.
oh yeah,
Yes, the worst advice I ever got was basically to so there is this thing, obviously, show don't tell, which
yeah,
is a really good piece of advice. But if you always show and never tell, then your characters, like, it's too far overboard. And I think there were moments where in early drafts someone would tell me, like, just like every time there was anything slightly telly, show don't tell, show don't tell, show don't tell, show don't tell. And I think show don't tell makes a lot of sense when it's like you're just like, he looked at her, he was happy, moving like constantly, and it's like, give me a little bit more, like get me into the scene. But there are times where you don't need to write 3 paragraphs to describe how happy the person is. If it's just like, um, Jen walked into the tavern full of um, drunk, happy men, or whatever. Like, that's not a real sentence, but like at times you don't have to. Like, there's times where you're just trying to tell the story and move forward. So what I would
yeah,
say, like, the worst advice I got was to like never tell. And I think it's kind of a
yeah.
mixture of like, tell when you have to, show a lot of the time, because it's definitely going to be more immersive for your readers.
Nearly at the end, I do have a question. How have you found the? So you're an indie author, obviously, and obviously I follow you on X, and I see a lot of banter over on there. How good and how supportive is the indie author community in general? Because just on the outset, looking in, it looks bonkers and incredibly, incredibly supportive as well. From
It
what we say, obviously we don't see anything, but
it's kind of one of those things where, like, there's always going to be people that you don't get along with within huge communities, or people that you think are annoying or whatever. But for the most part, it is a super fun, supportive community. Um, and I've been really, really lucky to have started one group and joined another group of some indie authors where we were able to sort of talk about things and, like, basically become friend groups that also write. So the first group is called the Secret Scribes, which I started. And there's 13 of us, and we all are fantasy authors. And that's the anthology is actually the Secret Scribes anthology. So that's been great. That's been for over a year now, and just kind of a really good writers group, support group, all those kind of things. And then I'm also a member of Willow Wraith Press, which ZB is also a member of, and
yes,
Bill Adams is the one in charge of that. Michael Roberti's in there. Timothy Wolf, got a lot of others as well. But like, that's another. It's a great sort of like support group, friend group, people you can talk to, and like that's really the thing you have to have support. And it's not just like, you know, guys, tell me my book is awesome. Hey, your book is awesome. But like, critiques, feedback, and then also just like being able to be like, hey, what did you guys think about this promo site? Did that work for you? Or like, hey, that bookstagrammer that showed a copy of your book, did you like reach out to them and ask if they wanted a copy? Like, how did you? So kind of like, just a lot of advice and things that, like, if you're just trying to do it on your own,
yeah,
it's overwhelming. And
yeah.
so
Well, there's so many books come out every day, don't they? Now it's a
so many
ridiculous
books come
amount.
out, and like the thing is that I think it's silly to assume that everyone is going to put down all the other books to read your book. Um, and so the best thing you can do is just try to make your book visible, try to get it in as many hands as possible, and hope some of them read. Um, and like sending out physical copies gets really expensive really fast, where you kind of have to choose the best way of like who's going to actually get one of those physical copies, because like if you send out a physical copy to every person who asks for one, if you
That'll add up very quickly.
it's too much money. So what you
Yeah.
really end up doing is like, if someone asks for a physical copy and you're like, this person has a good track record of either reading or just like, posting about the books and making them visible. Because sometimes, like on Instagram, it's just as important to have like a picture of your book on their Instagram than it is to have like an actual thing that says like they read it and loved it. Because if people are seeing the book, they're seeing the book and thinking about getting it. So like, you kind of just have to, it's really good to have a support group to kind of help you figure out what the best things to do are, who the best people to contact are, how to find readers, and like also how to just continue to get better. Because I think that's the main thing we all want to do is like, our first book's not going to be the best overall book probably, because you're going to continue to grow as you write more. I'd never written a fantasy story before Envoys, besides that little 5-page Dungeons and Dragons thing, to where it was kind of it was a learning experience for me, and I know that as I keep going, I'm going to grow as a writer, and later books will probably be better than the first one because I just have more experience with that kind of writing. I wrote a lot of literary fiction that was almost all first person, set in modern day, usually in New England or New York. So like very different from fantasy.
Yeah.
So in general, like I'm still learning a lot of the things, and I think if you think your first book has to be the best book to ever happen, you're never going to publish your first book, because
No.
you want to, you want to make it good and you want to make it something you're proud of. But you also can't like just keep that one book and refuse to publish it until it is the perfect book, because it's probably not going to be.
No. That's fair. So, last two questions. One is, are there any other indie authors that you want to shout out?
Absolutely. I've got such a big list, so I'm going to pick a few of my favorites. My guy, Nick, NJ Alexander, I know you read Fogbound
Yeah,
recently.
I have.
Nick is a fantastic guy. He's hilarious. I keep bugging him to actually get book 2 out, because
Yeah.
I joke with him that his entire book 2 is just he's written the word "the fog is lifted," and that's the entire book. But no, he basically has the book written, but it has to be revised some. But Nick is a great guy. Anyone watching, if you haven't read Fogbound, it's a lot of fun. A good epic fantasy with your found family and people on a quest. I also want to shout out R.A. Sandpiper, Rach. She writes more like fantasy with romance. She's doing really well. She's published a full trilogy now, and even for people who are not like big romance readers, I feel like they really work well as fantasy novels. The first one's called The Pocket of Lies. That is a really good series. I'm going to do 2 more because I always answer way too many on these kind of things. I'm going to talk about L.M. Douglas, Lorraine. Her book, Garantia's Guardian, is the first book in the series, and then her second book is called Garantia's Fury. They're really good epic fantasy, and she's really bad at like actually talking about her books. So I just
think
want
I've
her.
picked them up recently. I've just not got to them yet.
I keep bugging her to like actually talk about her books, because she's a good writer. But she's one like, oh, it's so exhausting. And she's from Scotland. That was my attempt at a Scottish accent, and bugging her to actually market. But the first book was great. I haven't read the other yet. And then finally, the last one, Sean O'Boyle, the funniest indie fantasy author. I'm going to say right now, he's the funniest. His book, Spricket the Bard, is very
I have
parody.
that.
Have you read it?
I've not read it yet.
Okay.
It's one that I'm hoping to get to by the end of this month, though.
Oh, it's so fun, and it's one like you definitely like you start out and like, oh, it's funny, like, you know, it's a fun little Pratchett type story, and then it's like the emotional weight hits you a little bit further in, and you're like, oh damn, this is a lot more than just a funny book. And then his new novella is coming out here very soon, and it's hilarious. I beta read that one. It's called Checks, Balances, and Procedures in Monster Hunting. So
that sounds really interesting just from the title.
I think that's coming out here in like 2 weeks or something like that. But yeah, Sean's hilarious. But Sean, Rach, Lorraine, Nick, all fantastic people. There are so many others. Like I could talk for another 20 minutes about that, but we'll go with those four for today.
And finally, where can people find your books?
They can find them on Amazon for ebooks. They are on Kindle Unlimited on there. Envoys, the Envoys of War, is on Audible as well. You can also buy copies on my website that I ship out personally and sign them and everything like that, and they come with things. The shipping abroad is expensive, but it's not as expensive as it was when I first started the shop, because I learned of this amazing thing called pirateship.com, which has cheaper shipping. So like originally, like trying to ship a book to England was like $30 in shipping whenever I first started before. But like with Pirate Ship, I can do it for 18. So like it's still expensive, but I can definitely it's cheaper than it was. But yeah, most of the books that I sell on my website are US because shipping and everything. But my website is davelawsonauthor.com. You can go to Amazon. You can find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. I'm on TikTok as well, even though I don't get very much there. But D Lawson Author. I don't know. I don't know why I didn't just do D Lawson Author as my website as well. I just wanted to make things difficult. But D Lawson Author on all the socials. Dave Lawson Author is my website. And yeah, if you, obviously not you, Ven, because you've already given my books a chance, but person watching, if you give my books a chance, you're the coolest.
Yep. And I will include all the links in the description down below so you can go and find the stuff even easier. But this has been a blast. Thank you so much for coming on for me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's been a lot of fun. And I can't wait to see where it goes next. And I'm excited for the sci-fi as well. So,
all right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.